episodes. Okay, so for today's episode, we thought we would revisit our classic mini-series of doing film reviews, which we haven't done for a while. What was the last one we did, actually? I think it
That
was,
was that Babangida movie.
yeah, the Propaganda film. So based on popular demand um, from some of the film heads in the crowd, we decided to um, do another film review, but this time of the film that we actually, well, okay, speaking for myself, I actually enjoyed for a change. So I think our style hitherto has been to review films that we watched so that you don't have to. But I think this is an example of a film that maybe we would recommend to watch. At least I would. I mean, it would be interesting to hear what other people think. But um, and the film in question, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is Saworoide.
Yeah.
Not bad, right? Thank
Man,
you.
no problem.
Wait for the applause. By the director Tunde Kelani, of course. Someone who probably, is well known by some members of the audience. And the film came out in 1999. So we watched the film to explore its themes, a lot of which resonate very strongly with some of what we've been exploring hitherto on the show. We thought that we would take some time to kind of talk through those themes today. Before we get into the meat of it, though, do we want to start with a kind of big picture overview of the film, a kind of synopsis, if you will? OEG, you're the one who recommended that we watch it, and you're probably the person best capable of pronouncing the name of the film. So do you want to give us a brief overview of what the film is about?
The movie is, like you said, is Saworoide, which means brass bells. Shaworo is bells, Ide is brass. So brass bells, it's just like you said rightly, it came out in 1999. It's a movie that was directed by Tunde Kelani and had people like Buki Wright, Kola Oyewo on it, Kunle Tefa.
Yeah.
And the play was written by one of the literary giants, Akinwumi Shola. So it focuses.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was written by Akinwumi Shola.
Oh yeah, and don't forget that there was a young Kunle Afolayan in the film.
Kunle Afolayan.
Where?
Oh, you know,
Kunle Afolayan was in the movie.
Who in build for the movie?
The Arrested Jabata,
the young prince.
The young prince, yeah, exactly.
Oh, really?
So yeah, that was Afolayan.
Yeah. They watched it carefully. Come on,
No, I didn't know it was him. I didn't know.
You didn't know it was him. Yeah, they used to get baby face that time.
Yeah.
Never get chicks. So the movie centered around like a village or a community or a city called Jogbo. So Jogbo, it zoomed into where we had like a king that was passing on, that was going to die anytime soon, and then the people around the community asked for like guidance, like, okay, you're about passing on. What are the pathways we should follow to guide ourselves when it comes to the governance of this our city or this our village? So the king made a pact. There was a pact that was made between the community and the rulership as to how to govern the people, but shortly after that, we could start seeing the machinations of like the elites that were going to do with king making and all, with their own machinations of trying to corner political power and use it for themselves. And they succeeded in doing that and installing a king that wouldn't even adhere to the principles that were laid down by the former king or by the community generally. That pact was essentially, reneged upon. And then we would see in parts of, in the movie where the guy didn't go with swearing the oath of allegiance to the people. So when they got into power, they started,
maybe you should say something about the nature of the pact itself, because it ties to the name of the film, right?
Yeah. So the pact it had to do with the people allegiance to the people. There was a drum. There was, it had to do with the king.
Yep.
It had to do with that drum, the king, and like some sort of incisions that you had to make. This is going more into cultural things, but
right.
what it essentially does is it binds the rulership to the tenets of the land.
Yeah.
You know, so when you want to become a king, you have to take those oaths. It's like how you go and put your hand on the Bible and the Constitution and saying that you adhere to all these things using the Bible or whatever. You know, of course, we know that in cultural, like in Yoruba setting or some traditional setting, you're going to have to swear, you know, with something that's much more different, you know. So that was essentially it. But as we see...
And just to say that crucially, right, it seemed like the oath depended on 3 key rituals. One being the crown, you know, which had some like herbs in it.
Yeah, the crown, the drum, and
the drum, which also had like a part of those herbs. And then an incision.
And the king.
The
incision on the king.
No, I'm not sure that. Anyways.
So it's like
I'm not sure about the king.
The king had fallen foul of.
The king had to take that incision to bind himself to those things.
So if he fell legitimacy of the pact, the drum would be beat, and if the drum
would be like a check.
Yeah, while he was wearing the crown, he would die. So it's a kind of check on the powers of the king, right?
Exactly. If you pay attention to some of the translation, of course it's in Yoruba. The king said something like he doesn't want to be tied to any sort of oath with some sort of rope. That's like metaphoric.
Right. So this was
so if you listen to
usurper, the guy who the story focuses on, right?
That's the king.
Yep. Lapita. His name.
Okay. Lapita.
Okay, sorry, Lapita.
He call out you up. So
right. I was interrupting just to try to see if I could establish that aspect of the
no problem. So they took over, and then the first thing they started doing was prospecting for where the natural resources of the country, you know, was. And they found out that, it's going to be in the forest, where their mainstay was going to be logging and lumbering activity, you know. And then they started plundering the country with multinationals and foreign counterparts. And they did this all through. While they were doing that, one minute, please, break.
Okay.
My begin there.
No, sorry. Handle it, man. Well, Megan, what were you saying? Actually, it seems like you were disagreeing with the framing of the
so it's not so much a disagreement, but I just thought that maybe my own reading of that pact, that mystic connection, was a connection.
Sorry.
What you 1 second? Yeah, Michael, sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, it was actually a connection between the crown, the drum, and the town. So in saying that, it wouldn't matter who the king was, right?
Sure.
And then it wouldn't quite matter who the drummer is, you know. So people.
No, it will matter who the drummer is. It will matter who the drummer is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see, in the movie, towards the end, 2 people could have beat that drum. So
but exactly. You see where he asked. See where he asked, do you have the incision to beat the drums?
Yeah. So there's something.
But you see so that's the point I'm making.
Yeah,
that's the point that I'm making. That it might be something that is passed on to you, but that you're linked to that as a human being. So I'm trying to separate the motives from the people, right? So it was, for me, I think it was the crown.
Sure.
Yeah, the crown. So I could have been the king. It's the incision that links me to it. It's the same thing.
Swearing the oath.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a good point. That's a really good point to highlight, because actually at a certain point, Lapita, this usurper king, says that he wants to establish a new law whereby
his children are going to be the ones continuing.
Rulership becomes hereditary. automatic.
Hereditary, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's a good point that actually, in that sense, it was quote unquote it had a kind of Republican aspect, right? Where like anybody could be, or maybe you don't know if you want to call it a democratic aspect, anybody could have been nominated, maybe from certain ruling families. I think there were families that, but then once you received this incision, you know, you were bound within a certain system of accountability. But yeah, I mean, so OG, you were describing,
Yeah.
you know, the situation further down in the script where in the plot where this guy has usurped and, you know, various like foreign entities are beginning to plunder the resources of this nation.
Yeah, so they went ahead with that until the farmers, the people in the community, the workmen, the beekeepers, people that use like the natural resource of, you know, the environment started complaining that they were having their environment destroyed. They were killing crops. They were challenging them, you know, chasing them off the land with guns and all that, you know. So these people banded together to actively like resist that. Though before doing that, they brought their complaints formally to the king, and yeah, you know, the king was like against them. He didn't listen to them at all. He was just more on the side of the fellows that they were, you know, chopping the money with together, the multinational guys in suits, you know, and then that cascaded down into them picking up arms, you know, and like snatching the crown from the king. Yeah, and then when they did that, the king was, you know, in a bad mood and sought help from these multinational guys, and those ones, you know, armed him, brought in military guys, you know, like armed the military guys.
Right.
Yes, they brought the, you know, brought in the army, and then made the army, you know, more powerful than the people's army, I say.
Yeah, the
you know,
people,
or the people's,
kind of rebellion.
the people's the people. So they quelled the rebellion, got the crown back. But at a point, the army generals and the leaders to saw the rot and decadence in the kingship and how they were stealing money, you know. So they too started to nurse ambition of taking power for themselves, you know, which they succeeded in doing at the point in time. And they continued, the military guys from the so-called democratic or the monarchy or the kingship, it switched into a military rule. And the military guys continued the same thing, which was the same plunder of the natural resource. And he was more blatant. That part was acted by Kunle Bantef, I think. He was more blatant about his chase of money. That's what he's come to do there. So he was more repressive, you know, using military power up until the people now reverted. Like they found a way to get him to like, he wore the crown, you know, to like legitimize his rule in front of the people. It's sort of like a symbolic conversion to like to like democratic rule or something, you know.
From military
to
more legitimate forms of rule.
Yeah, to just make people more accepting of his rule, you know. So, and it was at that point that they managed to beat the drum, which killed him eventually. And then, you know, they towards the end, they just pointed out that power returned to the people, you know. So, but in between all the things that we've laid out, there are a lot of things to unpack, you know. Yeah.
Nice one, though. I think that's a pretty good, like, bird's eye view of the narrative. So, I mean, now moving into trying to unpack it a little bit. I mean, obviously, this is in some ways a work of political propaganda or political education. I mean, depending what angle you're coming from, right? Because the relevance of this film to Nigerian history and the history of Nigerian politics, the role of the military, the role of corporations, you know, exploiting natural resources, the role of corrupt gatekeeping elites, are all reflected.
Environmentalism.
Exactly, the role of natural resources being linked to environmental degradation, and, you know, the kind of popular resistance that builds up through alliances between workers and youth, you know, to try to form a kind of counter-hegemonic bloc, one could say. are evident in the film, right? But I think what I'm most curious about is whether this works, whether this achieves its aim in terms of political education and serving that kind of positive propaganda role. So I'm really curious about what you guys think about what was effective about this film, maybe from your point of view, before we come back to talk about maybe some of the limitations. So Emeka, do you want to take a stab at like talking through what struck you as pretty effective or interesting when you watched the film?
For me, I don't know if it's. I think it's something I still battle with. So it's also possible that my reading of the movie is a bit uninformed. But so one thing that I wonder, given that the movie was produced in 1999, I'd take it for granted that it was a response to. It wasn't a veiled response. It was a blatant response to the Abacha era, perhaps, and then you could add Babangida era too, which is modern Nigeria, right? But infusing the military aspects of the movie with, what you can call, a traditional way of understanding society, or the traditional way in which society was set up, using kingship, chiefs, and all of that, as opposed to using the civilian, like democracy in the real sense of it, civilian rule.
Election, etc. Rather than
elections.
Yeah.
So I struggle to see. I'm not sure why that's the approach.
Right. Okay, so you're starting out with what you found less effective. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not. So I don't want to go all out and say it wasn't effective in the sense that it didn't work.
Okay, but it didn't compel you per se.
I just don't see. I'm not sure why that's the approach. Even though I understand, that maybe that approach allows him, shine the light on this pact that we spoke of earlier. The crown, the town, and the drug. As ways about, as one way of thinking about the devolution of power, but
no society
in the time frame that was set. I wonder whether going the civilian, democratic route as the counter to the old society, traditional society, would have been more effective.
Okay.
I'm a big cut. Somewhere there.
Right. Okay. I don't know, Oji, do you want to respond to that or to say what aspects? So I guess we're kind of starting with critique rather than praise, which is fine. That's what we usually do. I wanted to reverse that this time because, so that we don't get associated with needless basketballs. I wanted to see if we could reverse that, but then turning to Emeka was not the right idea if I wanted praise rather than critique. so a lesson I should have learned by now. But I guess, Oji, like, not to force you to praise the film, but I just wonder if you saw that aspect of framing.
It would be very helpful if we saw what was like the aim of the person that wrote the film. But of course we know that it is rooted, the movie or the script is rooted in a traditional like story, like a folklore or folk story. So the traditional aspect I get, and then we're saying it's 1999. Like Emeka has said again, he has also answered this question that maybe it's a response to the military era, because nobody knew for certain what the democratic era was going to bring fully, because in 1999 we start our
how long it would last, right? The military might have
because
like we're gonna come back.
Exactly. So, like that democratic thing, I don't, for him to speak on the democratic method, would be like him like saying he has a crystal ball or something like that. Say maybe most likely the thing will go bad, or he probably doesn't have the power to portray it as good or bad. So probably that's why he's stuck with the military one where we don't know say it ain't bad already.
Right.
For the country, and that there's this thing that people take like military no good, military no good, military no good. So, there's no, even if you pick the people that have like their own views about the military, they don't see still like the class composition of military or which class the military is serving. You can have a military coup that works. Thomas Sankara was in a military coup for Burkina Faso, and that's the best thing that ever happened to Burkina Faso. So inherently, it's not that military is bad, but because of the peculiar Nigerian scenario and what we've had, of course, his response was to portray the military bad, and yeah. So, and then we're still new to the democratic era, so that's it. Like, yeah. So I feel Emeka has also answered that question in terms of.
I mean, and by the way, we might disagree on the question of whether military is inherently or problematic in any context, or whether it's just a Nigerian question. But I mean, that's not the key center of our discussion today. So I won't let hold us up. But yeah, that's a fascinating point. I guess it sounds like you, OAG, find it justifiable that he chose a representation grounded in a traditional understanding of power as, a monarchical system where, a king is appointed by priests under trust from the people, rather than one simply kind of brought about by the ballot. I think I probably lean more in OAG's direction here because I thought it was kind of a nice frame shift, that allowed you relax and not feel like you're watching a documentary, like if it was just about, again, politicians, elections, then I feel that kind of suspension of reality that the film achieved, by going to an unnamed time, unnamed village, or a village whose name doesn't connect to the name of any real place, but grounding it in this very particular cultural context. Then it felt like it was, in a way, another universe that was similar to ours, but gone in a different way. Which then allows some space for analogy and metaphor and such, which I think might have been precluded slightly if the film was situated within the existing institutional context of modern day Nigeria, as Emeka suggests. So actually, I found that aspect of the film to be pretty effective.
Well, it's quite important to understand that this Kelani is someone that goes back in time, to dig for like folklore stories from the past. Like most of his his movies are anchored on things that, he went to dig up from, like maybe playwrights and all that, from the past. So it's usually not in like contemporary, like modern cinematography, as we would say, like all these things that we've discussed, all these movies that we've discussed. So yeah, so it tries to take our mind back to some, certain scenario or era, and then to reenact it. Yeah, so and yeah, that's what it does. So using that monarchical or kingship system, according to how the story was written, was probably an attempt to be original towards the story or the script. Yeah, and then the military appendages, all these other things, are like trying to recontextualize it up until where the Nigerian history don't reach at that point in time.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, another criticism that not a devastating one perhaps, but a criticism nonetheless that arises around the film, that is related to this question of tradition versus modern, is around the question of the portrayal of the traditional religious practice, which seems to be quite a central element of the film. Because, you know, in addition to the king and the military, and the business people who also wielded considerable power, the other source of power in the film were the priests, because they were the ones who would swear the king in via the oath, who would perform the incision, and they were also the ones who would guard the drum on behalf of the people. So, you know, and I think the portrayal of the priestly classes, you could say, in the film was largely positive, because when the king, the usurper king, rejected the oath and started to govern in a more authoritarian fashion and was obviously leaning towards corruption, the priests guarded the drum, you know, hid it from being destroyed, which the king wanted to do. And ultimately, the priests supported the counter movement, the rebellion, that led to the king's toppling. So the priests kind of come out quite nicely at the end of the day. And some folks would say, well, you know, that's not thoroughly critical enough, given that, you know, a lot of these kinds of figures, you know, the traditional religious leaders in contemporary Nigeria, even at the time at which the film was made, were already being co-opted by, you know, ruling elites, including the military. I mean, famously, Abacha was, you know, quite renowned to, you know, seek the services of marabouts and traditional spiritual, you know, healers and practitioners across West Africa, not only in Nigeria. And a lot of times these people serve to legitimize authoritarianism rather than resist it. So, I mean, do you think that's an unfair criticism, you know, of the film? Or do you think there are ways in which, you know, the traditional religious system still provides avenues for resisting the political status quo? How do you feel about the portrayal of the priestly classes, so to speak, in the film? I mean, OEG, maybe you can go in. I don't know if Emeka is still here because he's mute, but
yeah, what I think, you know, again, is that the script tends to tell us about what happened at that point in time and what the practices were at that point in time. Of course, inherent in every class structure or class society is the people that are against the group of people that are against the general masses. Or we saw that the priestly classes or the traditional folks that were in charge of the swearing in oaths and all, they were more revolutionary, because it was the same way the guys that were pro-democracy, all of them went into exile, you know, ran away. So these guys who took the drum, ran into the bush, you know, they didn't consent to the misdirection or misrule of these guys. So essentially, they weren't legitimizing them. Of course, they will still have some people that will do some jazz for them, whatever, you know, because if you notice, the new military guy had those two kingmakers, those two guys coming to him afterwards, trying to say, oh, you need charm, you need to do this, you need to do that.
Yeah,
you know, so it will still be some guys that will do the protection charm for him, you know. But the guys that really had the legitimacy of the people were not a part of that, you know. So I think the story, if we try to do like grafting the film into what is happening now, like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years up, we'll be doing a disservice to ourselves.
Well, no, but that's the point I'm making, that even in its own time, the traditional and even modern, quote unquote, religious authorities had already lost a lot of public legitimacy because they were increasingly being co-opted. I mean, that's certainly true for the traditional. You can say that, okay, if you read some of the people who write about Pentecostalism and such, you know, and even the Sharia movement in Islam, you can say that the modern religious practices were the ones providing some measure of resistance to the military, like Adeboye saying that Abacha was a prince of hell or this sort of thing, right? But yeah, the film seems to rather, instead of, portraying maybe the local pastor or whatever as some means of resistance to, no, I'm not myself trying to valorize pastors, but I'm just saying that, within that historical context, if anyone seemed to hold some kind of source of legitimacy and support for resistance within the religious sphere of society, it really didn't seem like it was the traditional religious practitioners. So yeah, that's why I think that, no, it's not so much. I'm not trying to offer a contemporary critique of the film to say that even in its own time, perhaps, it could be criticized from the point of view of over-valorizing the traditional religious authorities. Yeah, what do you think about that, Mega? You seem to be coming in there.
Yeah, I mean that's why for me it's important to start out trying to figure out what the movie tries to do. There's a part of me that thinks that the movie tries, or in one way pits the traditional against the modern.
Right.
And if I follow through with that, then I'd reach the conclusion, or I'd come to the conclusion that, essentially what Kelani seeks to do with the movie is to say, you see that really there's not much difference between, both systems of government.
Right.
But even within that framing, it's not difficult to see that he places the traditional above, the modern, almost as if to say that there are elements within the traditional in terms of the way that power was separated, because part of the reason why I keep coming back, and I think that I'd like to emphasize, the crown, the people, the crown, the town, and the drum. It's almost like it's a symbolic way of saying that these are separation of powers. Okay, so you have the king as custodian of the crown. You have the people as custodian of the town, and then you have the drummer and then the Ifa priests as
so let me reframe the question now in your terms, Emeka. So what I'm asking, right? We'll come to the town in a moment. We already talked about the crown. There was a lot of corruption with the king, and that system broke down. But what I'm suggesting is that the drum and the custodians of the drum, unlike the other two, remained untarnished throughout the film. In the town.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
That's what I was. I'm saying that.
That's what I was.
Do you see that as a certain weakness in the film?
That's what I was getting. That's what I was actually getting to.
Okay.
That's I start out by saying that it would seem as though Kelani himself favors, the traditional, because one plot
the traditional religious order, not the traditional monarchical order, right? I think you're talking particularly about the drum, right?
No, I'm saying that from me, the way I read it is that it's a separation of power, right? So the drum, the custodians, the drum and and its own custodians would step in or wade in to what's the word now? To curtail the excesses of the crown if it becomes overbearing. I think that's what he wants.
Yes,
that's
to see.
Evidently.
Sorry, Mika. I'm sorry. Just one. In the Yoruba context, that's exactly how things. We have Afro-Marxism, we have people where they check king at every level.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if those ones were now like bad, then there's no need for the movie because there's nothing to be salvaged.
Well, but this is what I'm saying is that in reality, but in reality, aren't those people often also complicit? The thing is that maybe, the writer of the film wanted to give us a way out kind of thing by highlighting these people as, one source of good, so to speak, or legitimacy. But I'm wondering if that could be seen as a limitation of the film because, in portraying those people as the allies of the masses, maybe it over-valorizes them or kind of, paints them with too rosy or in too rosy colors. So is that sort of,
but
is that going
being
too critical?
Maybe the film finds a way to diffuse this.
Okay.
So and that's a bit where I'm confused. So when the character that you guys recognize as Kunle Afolayan was much younger, and then his own parents were killed,
right?
Who did he run to?
So I think he ran to. Yeah, I think he ran to some of his families. Yeah.
No, he ran to.
He ran to an older drummer or something, right? The older drummer.
Yeah,
maybe a lineage of
who was within the priestly society.
Yeah, who was within the priestly society?
And we should, because we've not given this context that the child, the person who ends up being his grown-up version, was played by Kunle Afolayan, was a possible successor to the king.
Yeah,
he was also in the royal lineage, and when the king started to display these authoritarian tendencies, some of his advisors started to point out that, look, if he was deposed, this family
might have,
right. So he sought out to exterminate that family to prevent them from, challenging. So, and this is why the kid, who grew up to become Kunle Afolayan ran away. But yeah, Emeka is pointing out that he ran to the priests.
To the priest drummer. To the drummer.
Yeah, to the older drummer.
To the older drummer, yeah.
And then as the play progresses, as the movie progresses, we then realize that the drummer also had a son who wasn't quite in the picture earlier on, you know, and had gone on his own
sojourn.
That
was the I think somewhere along the line. I think
he went.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
So maybe I'm wrong to say that he went to the priest, because in fact the drummer, you could say, represented artists, right? Not necessarily.
I'll tie them up with the spiritual community, sir.
Okay.
Not be just drum for drumming sake.
No, sure. Right. Okay, fine. So it's not like Questlove drumming. It's like
you notice. I want to point out that you notice that when he ran to the drummer took young Afolayan to that his son and said, look, they've killed this guy's child. They're going to come for me. You have to bail and get out. Right. So he told that son, so the son was actually in the picture earlier.
Yeah.
You remember?
Oh, that's what happened. Yeah, no.
Exactly. So he told him, bail, if they don't find me, jet.
They will come for you.
Exactly.
Right.
So yeah. So he said that.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is that it still seems like, by and large, the spiritual or priestly authorities are largely portrayed as saintly. And yeah, I mean, perhaps we just have to accept that as the filmmaker, trying to not paint an entirely pessimistic picture about power, right? That, by suggesting that, okay, some holders of power are sometimes legitimate, sometimes accountable.
What I feel is that
I think it works out. Yeah, I think it works out. Now that I get that part.
Now you get the picture, right?
Yeah, I think it works out well. So the truth of the matter is that by themselves, the priests couldn't have changed the course of history or the outcome eventually. The only people who had the power to do that were the drummers, right? And at the beginning, it was a question of survival for the drummers,
for them to just get out.
They were going to be collateral damage. So it wasn't a question of whose side were they on. The king had seen them as threats, and he was going to
eliminate them.
With them. So I think it was a question of survival. And also, the guy who holds the whole movie together is this old guy at the palace who has seen different obas and all.
So you could call him the scribe or the kind of historian or something, because he's also the narrator.
And so there are even there are even secrets of the crown itself, or the town or the place, that were only known to him. So not even the chiefs knew about them, not even so because even the fact that if the chief had decided not to go ahead with the rituals that would have tied him essentially, to the crown, that if the drummer ever beat that drum, to a certain music, because underlying all of this is the role that music plays in the movie itself.
Absolutely.
Which is something
I want to come back
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if he ever had the drum beat by that guy, as long as he hadn't taken that oath, he would run mad. Yeah. It's also the case that if the crown doesn't leave the palace for 15 days, and that's how one way that the revolutionaries tried to want to topple
the government.
I think so I think that it kind of works out that
no, it does work. I'm not saying it doesn't work within the narrative. Of course it works. I mean, I think I think there are various reasons narratively why the positive portrayal of the spiritual powers, which include the drummer and the priest, I think we've now clarified, worked within the narrative. But I'm critiquing it from outside of the narrative, from the point of view of Nigerian politics. Like, if this was partially meant as a political education tool or a film for propaganda, then perhaps it risked overly valorizing the traditional religious authorities at a moment when a lot of them were increasingly complicit in the very same despoliation of society that the film is trying to critique. So, I mean, do you still feel like that's too unfair? I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't work within the narrative structure of the film. I'm just saying that, perhaps that limits some of the propaganda potential of the film outside of its own narrative logic.
Well, I just feel like
you get people who don't agree for Abacha way in local.
So that's the thing.
He even killed them. So I think it works out even within contemporary
that context.
I think it does.
Okay.
I mean, there are people,
and then again,
to be fair to those guys, they were on the run. They were bail.
So they bail.
The traditional priesthood. I mean, a lot of them were on the run. I didn't realize this.
Yeah, they even went on. Yeah, the guy Yangalua, that's his name. He went on exile.
He went on exile.
No. I'm talking about in real life, guys.
In real life, there will be some monarchical guys, and this thing we don't go with Abacha 100% now. Is it that the guy just leave them
but the thing is, like, in the film, they were the majority. I mean, in real life, we can't really come up with any examples, or can we?
They go day. I'm sure say someday. I'm sure say someday. I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure say someday. I don't think like the one for Ijebu Day.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't forget his name. Okay. I don't think say the guy in kiss ass like that.
That's interesting.
What's his name? Adetono or something.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I not say in kiss ass. I don't think that Awujale for Ijebu. I don't think he's into all this bullshit where everybody do. You barely see him, hopping and hobnobbing around with these guys. Barely.
Well, that's good. And I suppose then
I sound to be corrected though, but I know they see him, they do rubbish like that.
Well, yeah, then maybe he's part of what inspires that portrayal of the priest.
And and then again, if we try to understand, if we try to understand what Afolayo is, of course, I said Afolayo, the writer Kelani, of course, we must know his bias now. He did more cultural stuff. He did more of the cultural line. He wants to portray, the checks we did inside of, our culture and all. Because if you don't really have people that are doing the work of portraying their own culture, their own value systems, I don't say value systems, like that, because of course, in every situation or every society, good and bad go there. Even in that same movie, you see that part of the bourgeoisie will be part of the kingmaker. He helped them. He helped the revolutionary process.
So I want to come back to that. You see, and this is why I've been focusing so much on the priestly orders, because it seems like all the other power centers in society were portrayed ambivalently. Like on the one hand, some of them helped the revolution. On the other hand, some of them were opponents of it. Even the monarchy, right? The person played by Kunle Afolayan was portrayed sympathetically, even though he was a hereditary, he was within, the bloodline of being able to inherit power. But because he was exiled, because his parents were killed, he's kind of portrayed sympathetically. And of course, a fresh-faced, good acting Kunle Afolayan, being the one chosen to play that role, also helped make the audience more sympathetic to the character. Right, naturally. And as you say, even the bourgeoisie was portrayed ambivalently. The majority of the business people were obviously crooks, and portrayed as weirdos and creeps, and maybe even too much so. But then there was at least one guy who, it seems for some reasons, decided to support the revolution. But yeah, still, it seems like, in all those characters, it's only the traditional authorities that are somehow, the traditional spiritual authorities that are somehow, reserved as untouchable.
No, I won't say he set out to do that. I won't say he set out to do that, but of course, we just have to look at why do I keep calling him Afolayan? Kelani's biases,
Yeah.
So you go on.
I don't think it's just Kelani's bias, really. Okay, even when Said insists on the priest, so there's, in my estimation, if I remember the movie correctly,
I'm saying the priest and the drama, by the way, because OAG says they're both the priest, spiritual sphere.
Sorry, say that again. Priest and
the drama, because OAG says they're both within the spiritual sphere.
I just group them together,
So
we just play music.
I'm not gonna group them together. Me personally, I won't group them together. So I think
let's split them up.
I think the priest. What I want to group together is the crown, the town, and the drummer. Now, the priest is just there to mediate these things, right? I think the critique that I would give to the priest was his silence, okay? Because it was in his, the Ifa priest, it was in his shrine. I mean, I guess that's what it was, that the king refused to take the oath.
Hey, but did you notice that the king was
with a gun?
He had that thing on him.
Yeah, I agree.
He had that thing on him.
If we're talking about complicity.
No, that's
one
of my favorite parts of the film, by the way. I mean, the king was holding.
He had that thing on him.
Because they don't shoot him now. So if they don't shoot him, why no talk after? Do you know how many years now? When things don't bad, now you come begin to tell the revolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're saying that actually he wasn't blameless in the portrayal.
No, he wasn't. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a much more deeper.
He wasn't. He was silent. That's you can interpret that to be
as being complicit. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, but at the same time, like, he was silent, not like at threat of life and death. So in a way, his silence is almost excuse.
Now, what did the guy tell them now? He warned them, so maybe
that's why I said he was. Those guys, now survival will be their own. Both the drummers, all those ones,
and the priests, now survival. He warned them that they had to be quiet.
Okay, now let's consider.
And they never, and the king never make money that time, so he never feed bribe. Maybe not bribe before bribe, rather than to pull the gun. So maybe.
Yeah. So okay, then let's consider the role of the town. I mean, because we spent a lot of time talking about the official sources of power, but then unofficially, the people also had power. As they demonstrated when they revolted, and their revolt was driven by the fact that their lands were being despoiled by the activities of this logging company, and that the king was not responding appropriately. What did you think of the portrayal of the town? I mean, do you think that was, a fair reflection of how Nigerians were responding to, the kind of environmental and economic sabotage that was happening at that point in time when the film was made? Or do you think it was kind of a rallying cry intended not to portray how people were actually responding, but, to inspire people to respond in a certain way?
I think it's worth looking at the struggles in the Niger Delta to just, try to make an overlay. Say how it would not be when them Saworoide they talk that time. Say waiting they happen for a year. Waiting they happen for a year.
And it's also great that it was, Abacha who killed Ken Saro-Wiwa, actually. So I guess
you don't mean historically. You mean it was as in it reflects. The film reflected it fairly accurately. I think it's probably good.
Yeah. So what would have been the occurrences in the Niger Delta when they were polluting these people's lands, taking from taking the resources they are not, putting it back to the community, just killing people, harassing them with guns, all that, So is this a fair reflection? Because those times, of course, we still nobody say we don't do very politically sharp like that time, But what would have been the result? Yeah, but that's me anyway. I still, so yeah, that time, we still they fairly young at that time, but like what would have been the response, Of course, I know say the guy go court, I mean they carry him go court, but there will have been some sort of community mobilization where they form the Ogoni group where these guys come. Most came from Italy.
Most of, yeah.
So people go organize themselves. Their livelihoods were being tampered with, their material means of existence, and they had to resort to self-help, So that antagonism, since the king had turned his back on the people and then went on a journey of profiteering from the land, profiteering from the resources, once that antagonism done there, then of course you have a society that will clash with whatever rulership where they in power, be it military, be it monarchical and all that, because you're essentially hanging the people with a rope on their neck if they can't cater for themselves,
Yeah.
So that's it. So I think that reflected fairly, accurately, in my own mind.
What perhaps doesn't add up for me is the role that one of the so-called outsiders or investors, is that what you guys would call that chap? The guy who then armed
the groups, right?
Yeah. And I think that there's one part in the dialogue where he had to spill that he had done, taking such steps, and then he was told by, to go back and undo that act, right?
Or to abandon them.
That it was too late.
Yeah, to abandon them.
No, it wasn't too late. I think so. So there was a part of where, call them the multinationals, where even a multinational can overthrow a government, depending on their own interests. But what had happened was that he had taken that decision independent of
his crew,
and that right after he took the decision, he then learned that he was like the one man standing, and that the other people's interests dovetailed with the coup with the king, but then they then invited the military, the mercenaries, who a role that was played by Kunle Bamtefa. But of course, that then opens another chapter of how multinational interests can actually unseat or install governments, depending on where their own interests lies. So but then it also opens up a conversation about whether what then happens when you invite mercenaries, to do their bidding, I guess.
No, it really does. No, I actually found that part of the narrative to be very interesting, where the storytellers portray one of the business interests as aligning momentarily with the popular rebellion. And part of why I liked it is because, yeah, it just showed that in the mix of history, as things play out practically, the lines are not drawn very neatly. So sometimes these kinds of alliances are forged. But at the same time, I think the storytellers were quick to point out that those kinds of alliances also have their
They're
downsides.
very dangerous. Yeah.
Because it was the same multinational company that, as Emeka said, he went back into the cartel meeting and said, "Hey, look, actually, I've armed these guys." And then, his co-business owners told him, "Hey, look, you need to
Just abandon them.
tell us where they are."
Mhm.
He ultimately contributed to ratting them out.
Yeah.
The military arrived. So yeah, I think it adds more complication to the story, because one in which the multinationals were portrayed, simply as like pretty flat, cartoon villains, I think probably have diminished some of the force of the story and some of its kind of you
I
could
think
accuracy, right?
I
And
think
process.
what it sets out to do is to just kind of sound a note of warning to would-be revolutionaries that they have to be careful with all these alliances with people that are saying they want to help you. Just, maybe that's just what I think that aspect was, and then things, like the lines of history are not drawn clearly like that, especially during revolutionary tussles like that. There are times, or there were times during the Cuban Revolution where Yankee they assist the Castro rebellion, because they didn't know, like Che Guevara said it, that they were gambling on two decks from the Continental card.
But just like Nigeria, one of the most reactionary countries in Africa, also supported the ANC.
Yeah, and even people Guinea-Bissau, all this, like,
exactly.
For sure, Frelimo for Mozambique. Frelimo for Mozambique.
Yeah.
So Nigeria,
Angola.
Angola. Sorry, waiting be this one for Mozambique. This guy's movement in Mozambique, I've forgotten, but Nigeria supported Cha.
Okay.
MPLA, yeah. So that's the thing, like, so they don't know that it's just sounding a note of warning that these people are snaky. They can mess you up at any point in time, so no go believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, the other aspect of the portrayal that I thought it would be interesting, to check, to get you guys' perspective about is, the question of how women were portrayed. This is something that, again, as a largely male or male adjacent, male passing podcast,
you don't have too much.
Yes, I mean, we obviously, and yeah, we do examine this theme in all the films that we review. I mean, how do you feel the portrayal really of women in it? There were some women who were part of the multinationals. There were women who were part of the rebellion. There were women who were part of the monarchy, the Olori. Yes, and I think probably the priestly castes were the only area of society where women were not present. Do you feel like that was, a fair portrayal? How do you feel like that compares to Nollywood more generally, in your experience? So I just wonder how you guys reacted to the gender aspect of the storytelling.
I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was bad, because, like you said, in a large chunk of the movie, at least, it show women where they inside bush, they carry gun with the revolutionaries for the. It show women where they as the Olori for the. I think for society too, the people where they join the town and people where they chant for the front of the king place, they protest. The women they there and all that, So like it wasn't, it wasn't bad. Say maybe they neglect the role where women they play outrightly for. Yeah, I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was bad.
No, I agree. I think it probably does a better job of this than 76, right? The other film that we reviewed where we talked a little bit about the gender component. Because, at least here, I mean, women are not really portrayed simply as victims or as enablers of
Active participants, yeah.
Exactly. They seem to be participants in various sectors of society, which I think is reflective also of the pro-democracy struggle in Nigeria, even if the role of women have not necessarily been adequately narrated in that struggle. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about is the question of armed struggle versus peaceful resistance. I think that one of the interesting aspects of this film is that it doesn't shy away from the question of the necessity sometimes of armed struggle. What do you guys think about that? I mean, because the people, that is to say the artisans, farmers, hunters, and youth that were resisting the authoritarian king and his desire to extend his power indefinitely, and also resisting the army, ultimately took up arms, not only when they were given arms by the multinational company, but even prior to that, they took up arms themselves. How do you feel that was portrayed in the film, or how did the portrayal resonate with you? Did you feel like it was the overvalorization of the armed aspect of liberation or revolutionary struggle, or do you feel like it was fair that, like, in a sense, that's not something that we can discount entirely? I mean,
maybe Emeka should go for
Emeka, yeah,
Okay, so let me talk back one step. I think that even though I can't quite imbue it with meaning right now, so I think that the aspect about how women figure in Saworoide, that's the correct pronunciation, right?
You try.
Nothing to you, my brother.
Now, say, I think it's important to think about. I mean, for people who would see the movie, to think about the roles that the two women in the life of the king play, right?
Sure, they were the central women, I think, in the film.
Yeah, so it's through one that the king finds out that his supposed daughter isn't his, and then it's because of that daughter that is not his that his to a large extent some of his plans towards the end didn't materialize, or they were foiled.
Yeah, true.
Because once it became obvious to the second Olori that, I mean, the younger one, who was the prize of the palace, that harm was going to come to her daughter, largely because the king couldn't be bothered, since he already knew that it wasn't.
Yeah,
the child wasn't. Yeah, I mean, that's how, to an extent, it's that girl that even saved the day, really. So I guess that helps ties into the question about armed struggle. Personally, I don't think that there was much beyond showing the extent to which human beings, or society or people can go when pushed to the wall. I don't think that it does anything to resolve the crisis in Jogbo.
Right. Like the taking up of arms by the people, you don't feel like it was in their victory?
Yeah, I think it does some things, right? It gets it gives it shows a bit of camaraderie, at least it draws in the far priest, who then comes out to say that, oh, okay, if you guys are really keen on changing
the order
of things right now, and here's what can be done. Okay, So they try to do it by seizing the crown, all right?
Right.
But then they are met with a much more stronger force, which was the military,
Yeah.
which then means that all they did was try, but they didn't quite achieve their goal, you know. So for me, I think that there's a limit to that, what that portrays in that sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Probably, yeah, that you know, that people will rise and lift arms if you know, they're pushed to the wall, because what essentially resolves, okay, but I mean, so, but also the revolutionaries go in, it's not like they even go in search of the drama, you know, because they couldn't even stop Ayangalu from being imprisoned, you know, since, you know, that was like a stopgap measure as to, well, if this guy can't beat the drum, there's nothing that will happen to the king. So it was almost like divine it was more like,
Exactly.
you know, the conflict was resolved by some kind of divine intervention,
Right. And
which
also,
then,
yeah, and also,
yeah,
you know, I think the conflict was partially resolved by the traditional people really digging deep, you know, into into the depth of their tradition, to remember that, oh, look, if I beat this drum and call the name of this my son, then he might emerge. And, you know, the son does emerge. And, you know, even though his father is at this point incarcerated, his father having remembered to beat the drum at that point in time was crucial in his reemergence, kind of thing. So I guess the question I'm posing here is that, you know, is it almost as if the storytellers point to the futility of armed struggle without having the right traditional spiritual backing behind you? I mean, am I reading too much there, OEG? What do you think? Like that he's saying that, look, it's not armed struggle that will liberate the people. It's if the people rediscover their traditional self, you know, through alliances with, you know, their historical and spiritual, um, you know, allies in the countryside.
I think it's just one full package, because nobody go commot leg for your neck if you know force them to at least give you breather. Like, they're not going to take you serious. Imagine if they were just, you know, plundering the place, and then the people just kept quiet and then kept going to the palace and then talking. You know, say the king just is select person to go follow them talk. Say, let's just tell them something sweet. If that's what they stopped at, then the crisis, you know, go precipitate, reach them digging deep.
Yeah.
So I think that armed struggle played its own part
True.
into carrying the story, or carrying the events, chain of events, into where we want to reach, which is like reconnection to much more deeper aspects of what needs to be done. Yeah, so I
Return to
think
the source. So one might say.
Cabral, exactly. I was going to say Cabral mentioned something about re-Africanization of our minds. Something like that. So in that return to the source, that his book, that's actually called, you know, re-Africanization of our minds, which means, you know, going back to some of our certain principles, African principles, you know, to, you know, like remove ourselves from profiteering Western thinking and all that, you know. So yeah.
No, so
so
I've been putting these questions to drive us towards, you know, a certain crescendo in how we respond to this film. And I guess the ultimate question, and, you know, maybe it's even the titular question of this episode, is, would you say then that this film is Nollywood's first Marxist film? I mean, that maybe that's provocative, but the more poignant question I'm trying to ask is, would you classify this film then as a work in some ways of Afro-Marxism? Because, as we've said, I mean, clearly there was antagonistic class elements narrated throughout the film. Clearly there was, you know, a more than healthy dose of skepticism and even some level of hatred towards multinational business, particularly in its guise as an environmentally destructive force. And clearly there was an evident amount of respect that the director had for popular revolution, even the point of armed struggle, you know, featuring unification of working class and artisanal interests with those of the youth. And as you just said, OAG, then, you know, he adds in this component of the possibility of a re-Africanization that was very popular amongst Afro-Marxists of a certain generation. So could we say that this was actually a Marxist moment in Nollywood? Does that go too far?
I think because of the components that you've highlighted and the emphasis on those components, the class antagonistic components, of the ruling class against the people, the role of the multinationals, coming together of the people, armed resistance, their efforts, at the point in time they were leafleting, they were sharing like leaflets. So all these things show us the machinery of society in its full picture. So like that is very, very important. And it shows like it's very, very sensitized. It sensitizes us to knowing that there are components of political movement and things or forces that bring about social change. So it gets like, a very good pass mark when it comes to like, a Marxian, looking at it through a Marxian lens. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Yeah. Emeka, do you want to take a stab?
So I just think that going that Marxist route with the movie would be quite a leap. Not that there are not elements to it that that provide that what's it called, grounds for looking at it through a historical materialist point of view. But just to say that, I don't think that that's what the producer set out to do. Not the producer, not the original author, not the original author of the story. Yeah, so
not at all.
Yeah, so I haven't quite dug into Kelani's works as such, but I don't even think that Kelani is an Usman Sembene in that sense. So,
right. Yeah, but
I'm not pitting both against each other. That's not my own thing, but I just think that it's more traditional, than it's so except the point that we can make is that to say to Marxists that there are elements within the African tradition that are suited to understanding or
well, but this is why I asked
Marxism.
But this is why I asked
if today in contemporary society.
No, but Emeka, this is why I asked.
It was a work that was grounded within, that.
No, but this is why I asked if we could call him an Afro-Marxist, because I wasn't talking about, Marxism in a purely Eurocentric sense. I was talking about the Marxism of Cabral, who AOG has just reminded us was talking about re-Africanization. So, so I'm talking, I guess, about
are there elements that we can pull on, right?
Yeah, are there elements, or would you even say that despite whatever his intentions were, or whatever his political orientation is in real life, he ended up perhaps inadvertently giving us Nollywood's first Afro-Marxist text? Is that pushing it too far?
Okay, no, once you don't put that inadvertently there, then
at least he highlights the social relations of society, and once it becomes antagonistic, you start seeing the social forces clashing and the contradictions of society trying to resolve itself, be it in an African method or traditionalist method or military. Yeah, so that's it really for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because there's a strong element of music as protest there.
Sure. On that note, right, let's do final reflections. We've talked about the film almost entirely from a political angle, but hardly from an artistic one. Just reflecting on how we experienced the film, watching it, and whether we'd recommend it. So from that standpoint, let's maybe go in reverse order as before. Maybe Emeka, you take a stab first. What were your reactions to the film as a piece of art? Would you recommend it? Did you enjoy watching it? What parts of it were maybe more enjoyable than others? Maybe you could just do that briefly as your closing remark.
Yeah, I think it's a movie that everyone should see. I think it's a movie that should travel. I don't know how far it's traveled. I must confess that, I'd heard about it. This wasn't the first. OAG wasn't the first person who brought it up, but it was OAG's insistence that I then eventually watched it. So yeah, I think that as a piece of art, it's really up there. I mean, Kelani doesn't need any introduction. He's like the master. You know, people, the person that maybe even Afro-Lion looks up to today. But I think it's laced with a lot of adages. There's a lot to learn from folklore.
Yeah.
So it's quite strong, and like, I mean, I can't delve into the art of filmmaking because that's not my fault. But, I think that even from the cinematic point of view, that there's something that filmmakers can learn from it. And then what's most strong about it for me is how they use songs, as for either praise singing, the movement between songs that are used for praise singing and those that are used as protests.
And teaching us lessons too.
Yeah, and songs that set the tempo for different openings of different scenes. Songs that show that, okay, this is tense, this is joyous, all of that. So that's so almost that there's also a way to watch the movie just using the tempo of the songs,
definitely
how it narrates the movie. So I guess that it's a great piece of artwork, as far as movie making goes. What I think we have tried to do is to see if the narrative, it's whether the make believe part of the movie is in consonant with the arts, of it.
Totally. Sure. Would you, anything to add there?
Oh man, Emeka said a lot. It's not a bad movie at all. Like anyone that's trying to, like, in clear terms, just look at Nigerian society of that time anyway, and wanting to just graft their minds into what has happened, and the things you can pull from, like culture, all that. Just take a look at the movie. If you're really willing and ready to learn, and dig up, do a bit more research, you'll see a lot of overlapping scenarios, overlapping contexts with Nigeria and what the movie, is trying to say, how the elites mismanage resources, all that. It's just in there, so it's just a story retelling itself in real time, so yeah, that's it.
I definitely agree. The film made me want to learn Yoruba, so which everyone should anyway. Yeah, I mean, it had subtitles obviously, so you can watch it without that, but definitely makes the culture very appealing.
Put the link up.
Yeah,
put the link up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely link to it. I think the director for a very long time left the film on his YouTube page to be freely watched, probably after the copyright elapsed, but it seems like there's some restrictions to that now. But if you do want to access the film,
check the movie out and see all the class antagonism there, and how the nouveau rich guys were buying Benzes of Benz 230.
Those Benzes look nice.
They look like Kabu Kabus now.
Kabu Benz, yes.
No, but they still have some of that allure, of that. If you see a really maintained one nowadays, you can still capture momentarily
the essence of that time, right?
Yeah, what it would have been like, to just arrive in the village
with your Benz.
Clean.
I know what you talk, but whether well-maintained 504, well-maintained 505, or well-maintained 230.
Yeah.
Those things are relics, man.
Man, I tell you, some like 2 years ago, so I go price 504 for J-Town.
How much they call out? 50,000?
Oh, bro, for where?
Come on.
Oh, like a clean 504. I don't think you get anything less than 600, and that was 3 years ago.
I still they see well maintained though, with AC and everything, though, power windows though. Pujos in Coal City. Even to
No. Now that kind of place they go they cool like Enugu, Jos.
Enugu, right?
Yeah.
You go get
230.
some civil servants we park the car since they wash them every morning, service them. But they know they drive out. You know what I mean? Like Easter Sunday, the car will come out.
Oh man, shit.
Yeah, man.
And they try with the props too, the cars, all that.
Oh yeah.
Dress,
No,
you know,
I think it's
all
true.
that nice music. All right, man.
Anyway, watch the film. Let's leave it there, Shay.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Peace, man.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, you guys take care.
Adios.
Yeah. So send me your recording if you did one.
Yeah, it was my own good. It was good, right?